Oh, hello, come in. Hi. Now, I've got something to show you. You asked me the other day about Bibles. That's what, being a priest as well as a poet, I would probably have um, more than one copy of the Bible, and that's very true. So I just got a few of them out to show you because it's sort of all of them. Of course, the Bible, I mean, this is an extraordinary thing. I mean, the word Bible, as you probably know, comes from the Greek word for a book, biblion, and it was referred to always originally as ta mega ta biblion, the great book, and then that eventually became just the word Bible. And as you know, it's really, of course, a collection of books. It's all the different books of the Old Testament and the New Testament, and books in every genre, from history through to parable and poetry and proverbs, all kinds of things. Anyway, come over here. I'll show you the most extraordinary and, in some ways personally precious. I mean, they're all precious. When the Queen was given at her coronation a copy of the Bible, amidst all the splendour and the regalia and the crown jewels, the Archbishop gives her this little book and says, "Receive the most precious thing this world affords," in comparison with all the crown jewels and the whole abbey, the Bible. So it's been precious, and of course it's astonishing that we have the gift that it's been translated, and so beautifully, of course, in the King James Version, which this is. But a lot of families have family Bibles, and this is just such a family Bible. And they carry the history of a personal family, their moments in a family's life. And of course, that's great because, in a sense, the Bible is also a collection of family stories. Although so-and-so begat so-and-so, we feel this great story of God's coming into the world and touching individual people and their children and their children's children. If you think of the whole Joseph saga, and then you think of Jacob, whose name becomes Israel, and then the 12 tribes of Israel, and so on. Anyway, let me show you this. You can see it's got very beautiful binding. I'm holding it carefully. It's a very precious book, and the back is starting to come away. So at some point, when I can find a good enough book restorer and binder, I'm going to have to go back to one of the college ones. I'm going to have this binding restored. Now, why is this so precious? Well, before we go to the poem that's inside it, here's an inscription. William A. Mackey, Des Moines Terrace, Govan, up there on the Clyde, 22nd of December 1876. And it's even got about his pew number 6 in his church, back in the days when people had their own pews. So this is my great-grandfather Mackey. It would be most people's great-great-grandfathers, but my grandfather, my mother's father, was a widower when he married my grandmother and had my mother quite sort of late. So this goes a lot further back. Now, my great-grandfather Mackey was a ship designer and shipbuilder and built ships on the Clyde. I have his ship designing instruments and I have some books of his ship designs. And for a while I had a little sailing boat called Dayspring, because the 100th ship that he ever designed, he gave freely to a Scottish missionary society, and the boat was called Dayspring, with the idea that Dayspring from on high visited us. Anyway, so he had this book in 1876. But then he married my great-grandmother and decided that this book, which he'd had in his own youth, he would make a present to her. And he enclosed this beautiful poem. So this is to Janetta English Wiley Mackey from her loving husband on our marriage anniversary, with muckle love. That's lovely. A bit of Scots dialect in here. And I loved to discover this because obviously poetry is a thing of mine. And of course, eventually my grandmother, became a considerable poet. So the idea that my great-grandfather and great-grandmother were exchanging poetry. Let's just look at this poem that he's written for her. I think it's really quite an accomplished poem. And it's beautifully written out. And it's a picture of marriage within the context of shared Christian faith. The years roll on unheeded in their flight, maybe because you helped to make them bright. Dear wife, in this our earthly pilgrimage, Each day may we peruse the sacred page and learn how we, by God's good guiding hand, redeemed at last, may reach the heavenly land. With joy and hope, then, let us day by day in calm humility pursue our way, free from all care, seeking the better part, enjoying God's good gifts with thankful heart. Falkland Bank. One of his ships was called Falkland Bank, Partick Hill, June the 15th, 1894. So, of course, he got the book in 1876, and then afterwards he gave it to his beloved. And it's remarkable. When I was given this book from the treasures of the things up at the croft that had belonged to my family, and I was opening it up, and I'd just written my book, Sounding the Seasons, and I'd chosen, let's just look at, for the very beginning of Sounding the Seasons, just as a sort of verse, I'd written Luke 10, after this the Lord appointed 70 others and sent them on ahead of him in pairs to every town and place where he himself intended to go. And this is because there were 70 sonnets, and I felt like the sonnets were being sent out as sort of harbingers of Jesus into people's lives. So I was perusing this Bible, and amazingly, I found that this verse in Luke, which had meant so much to me, that my great-grandfather, at some point in his life, had underlined that very verse. After these things, the Lord appointed other 70 also, and sent them 2 and 2 before his face into every city. And when I found that underlining, I just felt this sudden sort of leap of kinship. Anyway, I'm just going to show you 1 or 2 others, and then I'm going to read you a bit. So this is a very nice, you won't be surprised to learn that I love the King James Version, the Authorised Version as it's called, and that's my go-to for reading for my own personal inspiration, though when I write scholarly books I tend to quote the NRSV. Anyway, this one also has a presentation plate, but this one is to me, presented to Reverend Malcolm Guite from St John's Church of England Primary School, July 1998. With many thanks for all your assemblies. And this is when I was a vicar in Huntingdon, and I used to often go into the school and give talks and take in the guitar and do assemblies. And so when we left, they gave me this, and I'll pass this on to my children, and I hope they will to their children, and so on. And so just as I have a book with inscriptions from the 1870s and 1890s, I hope eventually, as long away from now as this is, that my great-great-grandchildren might pick up a book that was inscribed in 1998 as opposed to the 1870s and think, gosh, that was a long time ago, because these books will outlive us all, just as the truth and wisdom in them does. So there's that. And then these other 2 here are, if you like, for my more scholarly endeavours. This is a really nice, in fact this is Maggie's, but I've got it in my study at the moment because I use it as a working text. This is a very nice New Revised Standard Version, but the great advantage of it is that it has all the cross-references. So whenever, because the scripture is a vast network of cross-references, one verse takes up another, one night telleth another, a passage in Psalms takes you to Proverbs, and Proverbs takes you to Job, and then the New Testament comes along and rereads the whole thing in the light of Christ. It's extraordinary, the complex, interwebbed, interrelated nature of all the passages, even though they're different books and were written some in Hebrew and some in Greek. So that's a very useful reference work. And this, of course, is this is, as you can see, a very well thumbed, and Maggie and I both have this and use this. This is a standard edition of the Greek New Testament, and therefore the language in which the New Testament was written. And it's an incredible privilege to be able to read it in its original language. I was so grateful to be taught Greek as part of my New Testament Greek, as part of my training for the priesthood. And I remember, I've got it open at John's Gospel here, at Cato Hernan, and I remember John's Gospel was our set text, and we all sat down and worked it all out as we went along. Of course, you have to learn the alphabet first. But my favourite passage, perhaps in the whole of the scriptures, here it is, the beginning of John. Let me just read it to you. You can see the wording. en arche en ho logos, kai ho logos en proston theon, kai ho theos en ho logos. So, en arche en ho logos, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's just all changing. Incredible, the idea that logos, word, meaning, intentional beauty of creation lies behind everything, and then all of us and everything we see are, as it were, logoi, we're little words, we're language spoken, we're uttered out by God. So these extraordinary and golden words, and I remember gradually puzzling through them. It was very beautiful. I remember it was quite funny. The man who taught me Greek, New Testament Greek, was a Scotsman, which is a nice part of my Scots heritage. He was a Scots Presbyterian, and he was quite a severe teacher. But I realised you could tease him a little bit. And when we were puzzling through this, there's the bit about kai to phos enter Scotia fine. There we are. So, of course, you know that means then the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. But I had some fun when we were having to go round out loud, each reading it out, our bit, and translating it. I said, oh, to phos enter Scotia fine. I'm not sure what this means. Does it mean something like, and the light shines in Scotland, and Scotland has never overcome it? He gave me a very severe look, but I think he took the joke, and it was a bit of fun, student fun. So there it is, falling to bits, as all Bibles should be. I got out the Sounding the Seasons. Come over and have a seat, and we'll just finish with a poem, since I read you a poem by my great grandfather. This is a cycle of sonnets I published nearly 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years ago next year. It goes through the cycle of the church year, but of course the church year itself is a kind of cyclic reading of the Bible. And I wanted to have a poem about the Bible itself and what it means and what it's like to read it and the joy and privilege of reading it in a church. So before it really gets going, and before I have the sonnets on each of the four evangelists, I've got a poem here called the Lectern. And it's a poem that was inspired by the church I was in Cambridge. And there was a wonderful elderly man, very strong character, upright, who used to love reading aloud from the Bible in church. He regarded it as a great privilege, and of course we read from the authorized version. And my stall in the church was just behind and to one side of the lectern. So I would watch him as he walked up from the back of the church to do his reading, and then I'd see him from behind as he stood and opened the Bible to the right page. And he read it beautifully, but you could see he was awe-inspired every time at the thought of doing it. And I remember watching his hand tremble as he turned the pages ready to read the gospel. And that inspired this poem, and I'll finish our little visit with this. It's a description also of the lectern, which is a lovely, beautiful, plain old oak lectern. But you've seen many kinds of lecterns. The one we've got here at St Mary's in Linton is a magnificent great golden eagle with ruby eyes, or brass eagle with ruby eyes, but I quite like the plain ones too. So here's the lectern. Some rise on eagle's wings. This one is plain English workmanship in solid oak. Age gracefully, it says. Go with the grain. You walk towards an always open book, open as every life to every light, open to shade and shadow, day and night, the changeless witness of your changing pain. Be still, the lectern says. Stand here and read. Here are your mysteries, your love and fear, and running through them all the slender thread of God's strange grace, red as these ribbons, red as your own blood when reading reads you here and pierces joint and marrow. So you stand, the lectern still, beneath your trembling hand. So, although I have many copies of the Bible, I've only shown you a few of them, I never cease to be amazed that one should have even one copy and that we should have been given this extraordinary gift, which keeps unfolding in us and unfolding for us new mysteries of life. Anyway, thanks for dropping by.